was also wild because you had things like doubling the privilege tax, right? Just the percentage to buy a vehicle, double that, and that went to rebates for
Which
EVs.
is a sales tax.
It was a sales tax.
But the
Right,
Democrats,
exactly.
gross receipts tax is a
Yes.
sales tax. The privilege tax is a sales tax. I got to give them credit. They know how to name things to dodge integrity and honesty.
When transit came to us, they wanted 5 times what it was. They wanted to take the 1/10 of 1% and they wanted to make it a 0.5%.
Holy cow.
That was their wish list.
A 500% increase in payroll
and
tax on every Oregonian who
on
works.
every Oregonian that works for a service that almost no Oregonians use.
When the governor's saying these roads, and many of the Democrats are saying that people are going to be, they could be killed. And I'm like, then get rid of your DEI and plow the damn road.
And that's public information. It was reported on. She said it in pressers. And she said, we don't need Republicans. We just need them to be there for quorum. That's it. That was the only level of input the Republicans had on drafting, on anything, was we just need quorum. That's it.
Under Tina Kotek's leadership, the government of Oregon rejected
Right.
100-year history of bipartisanship, bicameral, they just reject it. And that's not the state they want. They're tired of a government that bullies. And they want it. And if the government under Tina Kotek is not going to honor the process,
Right.
then they want a vote.
I certainly say, Madam Speaker, and I think Oregonians will agree with me.
Political bodies exist to secure responsible government and to execute the will of the
You guys ready?
Sure.
Hey, welcome everyone to the next episode of the Oregon discussion on government efficiency. And I'm here without Daniel Bonham, the great leader, the senator from, the Mount Hood area and the Dalles. And as many of you may know, Senator Bonham resigned his seat because he's up for an appointment. He's been nominated by President Trump to serve as the Assistant Secretary of Labor, and he's awaiting Senate confirmation, which, with the government shutdown has been delayed. But I want to welcome back to the podcast my colleague and great friend, Representative Shelly Boshart Davis.
Thank you for having me. It's been incredible to work with former Senator Bonham for years. Been incredible to see what he's been able to do on this podcast with you, and incredibly honored to be sitting here. So thank you.
Well, it's a big announcement today, and I know many of you have heard rumors and have been contacting us to say, is it true? Is it true? But yes, it's true. Representative Shelly Boshart Davis is now the new co-host of the Oregon discussion on government efficiency.
It's incredible.
It's a tough shoes to replace Senator
Huge.
Daniel Bonham. Huge. But, there's been a picture circulating on social media called the Three Amigos,
Yeah.
which is you, Senator Bonham, and now Senator Christine Drazen.
Yes, that's true.
So fitting that a fellow amigo would be replacing Senator Bonham.
Yeah, it's been Christine, Daniel, and I in multiple places. When Christine and I entered the House, we were elected in 2018. So our first session was 2019, and Bonham's was he was appointed in the interim before that. So he was there about half a session earlier than us, and we just tended to somehow congregate together when Christine was elected as minority leader. Daniel was the deputy, I was assistant, and so it kind of started off then, and it has never really stopped.
Well, of course, I'm sure Senator Bonham back then, Representative Bonham, lorded his seniority over you. But
To this day.
To this day. But we have nothing but love for Senator Bonham and Jessica, and we're just looking so forward to seeing them both in D.C. and doing great things. But, of course, you're not the only replacement. There is a fellow replacement here The new great leader of the Senate Republicans who replaced Senator Bonham is our good friend, Senator Bruce Starr.
Hey, here we are.
Here we are again. Oh, great leader.
Oh, great.
Oh, great leader,
Oh,
Senator
great.
Starr. I used to call Daniel Bonham, and he'd always say, "Why do you always call me great leader?" And I said, "Well, there's, the North Korean is called the great leader." And I thought, we need one. But now I'm going to call you the so great leader.
So
We're
great.
taking it up a notch. Taking it up a notch. Well, that's who we have today.
Well, and I'd like to point out that it apparently takes two people to replace Daniel Bonham. So we've noted two different people in two different roles to replace former Senator Daniel Bonham. So we will miss you, Daniel,
Big
and
shoes to fill.
big shoes to fill, and we wish you all the luck to you and Jess.
Well, fitting that today we wanted to talk about transportation because the point person in the House, Shelly, has been you for quite a long time on transportation. And Bruce, formerly in the Senate, did transportation, now came back in 2024 with me. An amazing freshman class.
Amazing. Unbelievable.
Amazing freshman class of Republican senators came in. And Bruce was once again our point guy, along with Senator Suzanne Weber, to be the point on transportation, because always historically in Oregon, when we've needed a transportation package, it's bipartisan, bicameral. It's a negotiation. And we've been doing this way really as long as anyone can remember. Some say it went clear back to statehood. I wasn't there, and I can't find records of that, but I was the House leader in 2017, and that's exactly how it was. And the previous one you were integral in, and that was 2009.
Yeah. So starting in 99. So if you want to go back, we did a bipartisan bill in 99. We did a bipartisan bill in 2001. We did a bipartisan bill in 2005. We did the big one was 2009, the Jobs and Transportation Act. But yeah, this is historically where Republicans and Democrats come together, recognizing that transportation is one of those things that government has to do. We better do it together. Let's just make sure we do it right.
That's been the goal. And of course, ironically, people have referred to as the Oregon way. And often that's meant that it's bipartisan, no matter who's the majority party, and bicameral, and we come together, we bring folks in who are part of the trucking industry, agriculture, urban interests, everyone's involved. Until 2025, when under the leadership of Governor Tina Kotek and the House Speaker, the Senate President, suddenly Republicans were excused from the room, and I think given the message, we don't need your vote. And guess what? It collapsed. And then we were brought into special session. So I don't want to give, I wasn't in the room. So you guys were in the room, but I wanted to tell Oregonians, and for all of those in the Western United States who regularly drive in Oregon, that the challenges of our transportation system have been talked about for quite a while. What folks don't realize is the process to get to the right place was absolutely an aberration. These guys were in the room, and we're going to talk today a little bit about that, and then we're going to shift into gears to what recently happened in the special session in Oregon and what's about to happen now. So, Shelly, what happened? Why did the governor, Tina Kotek, with supermajorities, kick us out of the room?
Yeah, I think that it goes back to when we talk about being bipartisan for decades. Bruce had I almost call it, there was one one committee hearing that we were talking about the transportation, and he practically gave a TED talk on the history of transportation in this state and why it's been bipartisan and how it's been bipartisan over the years. And he's got such a great historical perspective on that. 2017, of course, you were here during that time. It was the first session before me, but I actually was part of that as a participant, and so I watched that from the outside a little bit too. But I think the reason that it's always been bipartisan and both the public has demanded it to be bipartisan is because we're talking about a core function of government, right? We're talking about roads. We're talking about something that we all use. And that's where I think that it's gotten so much attention, is because it's so noticeable and the breakdown has been so noticeable. And you say we were in the room, and certainly we were in some cases, but I'm just going to talk about maybe a little bit of that last week and then go backwards. But we were also in the hall. And I bring that up because you talk about our governor and the failure of bringing the parties together and being influential. But I can't get out of my head the last couple days of session where she's in the hall with her team and the Democrat caucus was inside the caucus room. And it was just like being part of a movie. And it was just so interesting to see the lack of leadership, I would say, in getting caucuses together and the Senate and the House and both Democrats and Republicans and say, let's come to an agreement. And while that was the last week of session, I'll go to the first month of session and saying, hey, what's the plan here? What are we looking at? What is this going to look like? And I was told, there's going to be a process, and I'm like, I'm not interested in, like, what's the goal? Like, let's start talking goals here. And I really think that there was a lack of leadership from the beginning, that Bruce and I were part of these chair and vice chair meetings, and we're just wondering when we're going to get to that next step. And it just took too long. We didn't even see a plan from, not our plan, but from their perspective until late May. Was it May that we finally saw something?
Yeah, I don't know. It was probably middle May. I don't think it was at the end of May, but yeah, it was later than you would expect.
Yeah, it just took a very long time, and I truly believe that there was no plan. And the reason is because there was no formal setting for, you mentioned truckers and AAA and the builders of the roads, AGC, and really stakeholders to the table. And I also want to point out, I truly believe that this idea of transportation, that they've opened the table so large. And I was on a stakeholder Zoom meeting. There's 90 people on the meeting. And I'm looking at everybody and I'm like, you're not transportation, and you're not transportation, and you're not transportation. And I think that's part of the problem. Transportation has been open to everybody who has a social justice interest in sidewalks, and now they're part of the transportation conversation. And we got to be honest with ourselves. They're not. Let's talk about the meat of the transportation here in Oregon, and we could solve the problem.
Right. And to a certain extent, because, one of the main interest parties are those who pay for.
The payers of the system.
The payers of the system, which include the trucking industry, which you're a part of, and agriculture, which you're also a part of, and then everyday folks who drive, which, clearly they have associations, AAA, all those folks have involvement. But it was shocking to me that there was no plan, and then a rush to suddenly, what happened?
So the co-chairs put their framework on the table, and that was the first thing that Rep. Boshart Davis and I saw was the plan. Republicans put an alternative on the table, and in my history, that's when the negotiation starts. Right? You look at what they put on the table, they look what we put on the table, and then you negotiate. You say, okay, we don't like this, but maybe we'll think of this, and you go back and forth. And the plans that the Republicans put on the table included things like repealing the governor's project labor agreement. That's going to increase the cost of projects and make projects take longer. we put on the table things like the clean fuel standard that is increasing the cost of gasoline with no benefit to transportation whatsoever. Those are kinds of issues that Republicans put on the table. If we're gonna advocate for gas tax increase to fix roads, we want to make sure that those dollars that Oregonians are paying actually go to the roads. It became very clear pretty quickly that the majority was not interested in a truly a negotiation. What they were interested in is how big of a tax increase would Republicans support so that they could, quote unquote, call it bipartisan. And I wasn't going to go to you as my colleague, Mike, and say, hey, I want you to vote for this transportation tax, knowing that the policy, the underlying policy that the Department of Transportation is pushing and the majority party is pushing and the environmental community in our state are pushing is antithetical to building quality, efficient transportation system. So that's when really the door closed on a negotiation, and the Democrats attempted to go on their own. I think Shelly knew that was a fool's errand, because I had colleagues on the other side of the aisle that had told me that they weren't voting for a transportation bill that I wasn't going to vote for.
Correct.
So, and I bet Shelly had the same kind of thing in the House side. So the presiding officers tried to drive this, and clearly they drove it off a cliff. They tried to solve all of the problems in the universe in one big, beautiful, ugly bill. And, we saw what happened at the end of the session when everything fell apart. And, Mark Meek said, I'm not voting for this. So he gets replaced off of the committee. The Senate president sits on the committee in order to move a bill. Those are the things that the majority had to try to do to try to move a bill. How in the world did they think that they were going to get 18 senators to vote for this if Senator Meek, one of their members, one of their 18, was going to vote no?
It's interesting because it is a lack of leadership. And I remember one time being asked when I was House leader, a decade ago, about negotiating with the then Speaker of the House, Tina Kotek, and my only answer is I can count.
Right.
Because ultimately, you know where people are going to vote, and they don't have the votes.
Right.
And if you don't have the votes, then if you're going to jettison the Oregon way, if you're going to jettison the way of bipartisanship and bicameral, legislative branch working with the executive branch, then if you're going to jettison that and go alone, you better count your votes.
Right.
And so not only was it, to me, abhorrent that they would jettison the process Oregon has had for well over 100 years, but the incompetence,
right,
not to even count their votes, to know and to think that they could just strong arm people at the end. So that's why in the 2025 long session, the transportation package fell apart.
Yeah.
And
that's when you saw, Shelly, what she talked about. The governor actually decided that, oh my gosh, it doesn't look like they're going to get the presiding officers, the leaders in the legislature aren't going to get a package done. So she inserts herself into the conversation at the very last minute, and tries to cobble together what she would call a Band-Aid in the last 12 hours of the legislative session. She's calling people into, I think she was camped out in the House Majority office, calling members in and trying to twist arms and get votes. It was like
watching a movie.
Yeah.
It really was towards the end, and just seeing kind of this desperation, right, of trying to piece together. And we're sitting there looking, being like, we've had 5.5 months. We started working on this last year. And to get to a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the package, when we talked about the framework that was first put out, that was a wish list. That was a wish list for progressives. That wasn't a transportation package.
No, it was the beginning of a conversation, I thought.
Well, but it was also wild because you had things like doubling the privilege tax, right? Just the percentage to buy a vehicle, double that, and that went to rebates for EVs.
It was just a sales tax.
It was a sales tax.
But
Right,
the Democrats,
exactly.
Gross receipts tax is a
Yes.
sales tax. The privilege tax is a sales tax. I got to give them credit. They know how to name things to dodge integrity and honesty.
Did you know there was a luxury tax
Is
in
there?
the first
I did not.
iteration of it? There was a luxury tax that, in addition to the privilege tax and the increase of fees of licensing and registration, there was also a luxury tax for $75,000 vehicle and up.
Higher, yeah.
It had another percentage attached to it as well, called the luxury tax. That I don't even know where they took that revenue stream, but it was luxury tax. And I said, does that include tractors and semi trucks? And how are you defining vehicle? And they said, we'll get back to you on that. So, I mean, just imagine every vehicle in the state of Oregon from a $75,000, I don't know,
Pickup.
pickup
Pickups
truck.
cost that much now.
But if they included every vehicle, like up to semi trucks and tractors, and what that luxury tax would be, I mean, this was just a wish list. They wanted to take, right now we have the payroll tax that goes towards transit. I could talk about that for, it's just a boondoggle. I mean, let's just call it what it is. They wanted, when transit came to us, they wanted 5 times what it was. They wanted to take the 1/10 of 1% and they wanted to make it a 0.5%.
Holy cow.
That was their wish list. And so, like I said, that's how it started.
Wow. A
See, that-
500% increase in
and
payroll tax on every Oregonian who works.
Every Oregonian that works for a service that almost no Oregonians use, and in my opinion, should not be a function of state government. I think transit funding should be something done at the local level. If their local county wants to do transit, they can figure out how to pay for it, rather than make every Oregonian pay for transit. Doesn't make sense to me.
One thing that happened during middle of the session, Bruce was actually influential in getting a managerial review of ODOT. And one thing, when we got that back, one thing that was in there in kind of the summary, and basically said ODOT can't be everything to everyone. It's gotten too big. And you look back at the 2017 package, and one of the things that did was it expanded revenue streams. So that's when the payroll tax for transit started, and they had all these different revenue streams. And where you think of transportation, and I truly believe so many Oregonians think of roads and bridges. And ODOT has become so much bigger than that it's now EV rebates and sidewalks and pedestrian crossings and wildlife crossings. And I'll go down this little tiny rabbit hole because that also includes small wildlife. And so I'm like, are you talking you're building like specific things for rabbits to go through?
Squirrels.
And they are. So I'm just saying, if people knew what their state dollars went to, they would just be irate when we're talking about some of this money. And the managerial review was completely accurate in saying it can't be everything to everyone. You got to get back to, well, like I said, this core function of government and focus on roads and bridges, which even, and I know we're going to get to in what's passed in the special session, doesn't even focus in the bill specifically saying it has to go to maintenance, preservation of roads. The only thing that acknowledges it at all when we pointed it out was the governor then wrote a letter and said, I hope that this focuses on roads and bridges.
Well, I would imagine a letter by the governor saying, I sure hope you do the right thing is incredibly influential, but not, but bureaucrats will be bureaucrats. And which bureaucrats, I think polling recently, I saw some stats of the most unpopular folks in America. And I think they rank with elected politicians. I mean, people are tired of government by bureaucrats, but ODOT had this expansion. I think what I saw, you shared with me one time that they thought in the biennial budget, this 2-year budget period, it was like $800 million in stuff that they were doing that they said was not their core mission.
Yeah, so we ask as part of this process, the minority offices, House Republican and Senate Republican office, asked the Department of Transportation basically, what are we doing that's outside of what we call core function? And they gave it to us.
They gave it to us.
They listed it out. And most of it is things that have been adopted and implemented in the last decade. It's just what Shelly said. It's the EV mandates and the EV charging stations. It's DEI on steroids.
Climate activity.
Climate, exactly. So many of these things that aren't core to a transportation system that supports a robust and vibrant economy. And that's really what we need. We need a transportation system that supports the economy that we all hope that we can bring back to Oregon when we elect a Republican next year.
Well, and I do know that there
As
are
governor.
As governor.
Right.
I like it.
We certainly want our roads safe.
Yeah.
We want our roads maintained. We want, pedestrian crossings safe. We want all those things, but that's all part of, in essence, moving people.
Absolutely.
And so we're talking about this in part because we want Oregonians to know this process that happened in 2025 that led up to this special session. So we sine die, we leave Salem, session's over. First thing the governor does is blame Republicans.
Yes.
In which you got to ask, if you're the governor of Oregon, you're Tina Kotek, you have supermajorities in the House and Senate, and you've just seen a train wreck from your own party under your own leadership. What's the go-to? Blame Republicans. I just started laughing when I saw her press release. I just thought, you kicked us out of the room and we're to blame. So then the governor basically says, hey, we're not going to plow roads. So she puts up a false dichotomy.
Correct.
Unless you give me more money, we're not going to plow roads. And they do layoff notices to people who are key to maintenance. They're going to shut down some of these rural places that where the maintenance crews are, and all of this to, it's sort of politics by blunt force trauma, right? And which is her way.
Well, the funny thing is, Mike, is in the meetings that Shelly and I were in with the co-chairs of the Transportation Committee way back in February, I looked everybody in that room in the eye and said, we ought to contemplate what happens if we don't get a package passed, because the cuts that were being proposed, even at that time, we knew weren't the right places to go. Did they respond to that statement when I suggested that maybe we should think about what happens if we can't get a package passed?
They 100% believed that a package would pass.
Yeah.
They 100% believe, and I won't out this person, but one person literally said, we're not the ones driving the bus. And so there was an acknowledgement early on that it was coming from higher up. And so that was noticeable early on. But I do think that as we're talking about focusing on roads, ODOT employees, because those I don't think the pink slips ever went out, but the threat of
Right. Certainly the threat.
The threat of,
And some notices. I mean, there were employees, because I got sent those.
But what's crazy about this is they say, well, we're statutorily, we can't spend more than this % on O&M, on operations maintenance. We pushed back and said, we're lawmakers. Change the law.
Right.
And so if it's statutory, guess what? We can change those. And that's what I would say when we would get these legislative updates during the interim. And I'd say, can we just take off that 6% threshold and allow ODOT to spend more money on O&M? And well, they're like, no, it's statutorily, written. And I was like, okay, well, let's just change that.
Right.
I mean, it's just so, it's like beating your head against the wall. Because like, we're lawmakers. Let's just change the statute.
Which was exactly what the Republicans in the House and the Republicans in the Senate put on the table during the special session that the governor called. That was the alternative to a massive tax increase is, oh my goodness, let's give the Department of Transportation the flexibility to move money from places that are less important to places that are more important. That's what families do. That's what we should do as policymakers, especially understanding where Oregonians are on this massive new tax, where they testify 95% against and 5% in favor. That's what policymakers should have done. That's what the legislature should have done. That's what we put on the table, and it was completely rejected by the supermajority. And I just look at this, and it's the arrogance of the supermajority. They've got 36 votes. They've got 18 votes. They don't need to talk to the Republicans.
You know, it's interesting because I remember when that occurred, and when you create this narrative that the governor did of scarcity, the only choice you have, it's a logic fallacy. Say these are the only choices we have. We offered up, and I think you moved in the Senate at that point to say, no, there are third and fourth and fifth, and there are more choices we could do here. And we pointed out things in the budget, like, you know, whether you're for it or against it, DEI, which isn't new, it's been going on. And you got to wonder, how many DEI training classes do ODOT employees need to go through? They've already been through, what, 8, 10 years? I mean, do we need to have, right? When you're saying you're not going to plow roads, when the governor's saying these roads, and many of the Democrats are saying people are going to be, you know, they could be killed. And I'm like, then get rid of your DEI training. I mean, and plow the damn road. But they wouldn't do that.
Right.
So we go into special session with a bill that was drafted without any bipartisan input.
None.
Yeah. The governor calls me and says, hey, I'm going to call a special session on this day or that day. And I said, oh, really? Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. She said, will you show up? And I was like, yeah, I'll show up. She didn't ask the question, what do we need to do to get Republicans to support a transportation funding bill or a solution to this transportation challenge facing our state? She asked, will you show up?
And that's public information. It was reported on. She said it in pressers. And she said, we don't need Republicans. We just need them to be there for quorum. That's it. That was the only level of input the Republicans had on drafting, on anything, was we just need quorum. That's it.
So it's ironic in a way. They hear the same governor who failed in the long session, the supermajorities who failed, because they rejected the way that Oregon always gets this done. They come into the short session. They said, we're going it alone. We don't need your votes. Just show up. And it becomes the second longest special session in the history of Oregon, because they couldn't even get it passed. Now, there's all sorts of circumstances, but again, it's one thing to be obstinate and reject sort of a method or tradition that's served us well. It's another to be incompetent. So here they are again. We're now in these crazy long special session, but what did the Democrats do? They passed a transportation package by themselves. So what's in it?
Well, one thing that's in it that is, I think, completely outrageous is, and you really get to see whatever makes it into a bill, you get to see the legislators or the outsiders pulling the strings. How are they going to get these votes? And if you're only looking at Democrats to pass anything, you're looking at the whole spectrum of the Democrat Party. So there's going to be that far left that believes there should be no cars, right? That believes everybody should be taking public transit. And if you do have a car, it has to be EV. They want to take away those choices, and and they've said it out loud, they want to change behavior through legislation. And so you're going to have that far into the spectrum, all the way to a more moderate that says we should pay for our roads and bridges, but maybe this isn't the best way to do so. So they doubled the transit tax. Earlier we talked about increasing it by 500%. They doubled the transit tax. They increased the gas tax. They doubled most of the fees for DMV fees. And so it ends up being this substantial package that didn't fix a lot of problems. We'll put it that way. It's not going to go to roads and bridges. It did save those 400 employees from possibly getting pink slips. But it was an interesting special session, to say the least.
And some of those employees, because of the governor's careless notice, which she was doing clearly for political leverage, some of those employees got other jobs.
Why wouldn't you?
And why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you get another job?
And now they're running ads to try to hire people into maintenance.
Right.
And to me, that is the consequence of when you play politics with people's lives for an agenda that has rejected the Oregon way, a complete partisan agenda. And now they got a problem with recruitment. But most Oregonians, my initial impression was that they'll see higher prices at the pump. But a lot of Oregonians go to the pump, they don't, every day it changes. And so no one's really tracking, is it up, is it down, is it because of a tax or this or that? But I tell you what, when you go to re-register your vehicle,
Oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
when you go to get
A new car?
a new car or you're buying a used car and you got to retitle,
Right.
I mean, that's when you're going to have sticker shock.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. This Band-Aid, as the governor would call it, is a $4.3 billion new tax for Oregonians to pay. And I would just point out that the bipartisan nature of the vote in the House, the bipartisan vote in the House was actually against the bill. Democrat voted against the bill. Only Democrats voted for it in the House.
Right.
And so, that should be a signal to Oregonians that at least you had one Democrat that looked at her community and said, goodness gracious, my constituents are telling me this isn't the solution. And she voted no.
So here we sit, and late October, early November.
Right.
And obviously this was an emergency. The governor said, we've got to, she pounded on it, et cetera. And she sent all those folks notices, layoffs. We heard the narrative, the press releases from Democrats that people's safety's in jeopardy, et cetera. Certainly she would have signed it quickly so that it could get into law, right? So that you could tell folks, hey, don't leave. We're going to plow roads. But that's not what she did.
No, that's not what she's done. She's holding the bill. She has, under Oregon law, she has 30 days, and those aren't calendar days. Those are business days, like working days. She has 30 days to sign that bill. And she has to have it signed. I believe the date is November the 12th, where she finally has to sign it by. Why isn't she signing that bill?
Well, you're telling me, and I want Oregonians to hear this, are you telling me the same governor who sent out press releases blaming Republicans, I'm here to work, we must get this done, the same governor, Tina Kotek, are you telling me that same Governor Kotek, who sent out notices and all this stuff, hasn't even signed the bill? What was this idea that it's an emergency, this crisis, and she hasn't signed the bill?
That's correct. She hasn't signed the bill. Not only has she not signed the bill, when the bill was up for public hearing during the special session, did she show up to testify in support of her own bill?
No, she did not. She did not even sign up to testify. As somebody who has been lauding this as an emergency, as we have to save jobs, as we have to make sure that we have the money to plow our roads, and this is what they have been, thrown out there this entire time during the special session. Former Senator Bonham from the dais pointed out, right? It was his question and said, "Where's your boss? Where is your boss?
And
why isn't she here?"
I think I saw a picture of her with a loaf of bread. Some citizen of Oregon caught on the day she, that we were called in a special session on Labor Day weekend, and there was a picture of her bread, and I just looked at that and I thought, so there were, let them eat cake. I mean, it was ironic in a way.
Yeah.
Nevertheless,
So she's not signing this bill.
she's not signing the bill.
She
Why
wasn't
would she
there.
not
She's
sign
not
the bill?
signing the bill.
Yeah, so she's not signing the bill because Oregonians have, under our Constitution, the referendum, wherein we can gather signatures. Oregonians can sign petitions and say, I want to have a voice in that particular law that the legislature passed.
So this initiative referendum process that we have allows Oregonians to vote on whether they wanted this transportation package rammed through rejecting the Oregon way completely,
Right.
rammed through. So they want to vote on it. But you also mentioned before the opposition when the bill was even up in the legislature, there were comments and people in support and people in opposition citizens who submitted testimony. Isn't that correct? And there was a wide variance?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we have a relatively easy way for Oregonians to weigh in on bills during the legislative session, and weigh in they did on this. And it wasn't even close. And I think former Senator Bonham had the stacks of testimony on his desk. I mean, it was a stack like this high opposed and a stack like this high in favor. I mean, it's 95% of Oregonians that weighed in were opposed to this bill.
Holy moly.
So it's clear Oregonians don't like it. And, honestly, we just completed a poll. I didn't really need a poll to tell me where Oregonians were on this, but we wanted to be able to verify to folks that are helping to finance the referendum that their investment is going to pay off. The polling demonstrates that Oregonians, one, they don't like the package overall. It gets on the ballot, they're going to vote no. But more importantly, 86% of Oregonians want to have the opportunity to vote. They want this on the ballot so they can weigh on it.
It's really interesting because, people can be on different sides of an issue, right?
Right.
And, my profession, since I was 25, was being an advocate, a member of the bar, and I've had different roles. I've been a military lawyer, still am actually in the Guard, and so, I always appreciate a process where everyone gets a say, and that there are different views, and by having different views and different say, advocacy, you usually get to the best result. I'm sure not always, but you could be for this package or you could be against it. And you could be completely united that the process was abhorrent. Because even if you're saying, hey, I'm going to vote for it, but I want the people to vote because the process was so abhorrent. Under Tina Kotek's leadership, the government of Oregon rejected
Right.
100-year history of bipartisanship, bicameral, they just reject it. And that's not the state they want. They're tired of a government that bullies, and they want it. And if the government under Tina Kotek is not going to honor the process,
Right.
then they want a vote.
What she is doing by delaying signing this bill, because we cannot gather signatures on those petitions until after she signs that bill. What she's doing is she is shrinking the number of days that are available to Oregonians to gather the signatures to get this on the ballot so voters can vote.
So she's manipulating the process.
How is she supporting democracy? One of the favorite terms of our friends on the other side of the aisle is, we're all for democracy, when she's preventing a democratic process from occurring.
And the same governor who jettisoned the process of 100 years, who, politics by just blunt force,
Claimed an emergency.
put all these people in who work for ODOT, making sure our roads are safe, put them in a state of anxiety about
For months.
jobs, right? For months, claims it's an emergency, then won't sign the bill
Right.
because she's trying to manipulate the process against the vote of the people.
Yeah. So Representative Ed Deal, myself, and Jason Williams, the executive director of the Taxpayer Association of Oregon, are the co-chief petitioners of this effort to provide Oregonians the opportunity to vote on this. We're waiting for the governor to sign the bill. We expect that she will play the calendar completely out to the 12th of November. And then we will have a sprint because we have to get the signatures before the end of the year, because we have 90 days after the end of the session to get the required signatures. So we need to get about 78,000 and change in order to qualify valid Oregon voter signatures. Where goal is 100,000. And so we are right in the middle of organizing. organizing that effort right now, raising money to ensure that we have the opportunity to be successful at that. Oregonians are clear they want to weigh in. We intend to give them that opportunity. And the governor, on the other hand, wants to make it as difficult as possible for Oregonians to have their voice heard on this particular tax.
Well, whether you're, as an Oregonian, you value the process, we got to get this on the ballot.
100%.
Because you can't reward such abhorrent leadership and incompetence on top of that. But people deserve a vote. If the supermajorities in Oregon and the Oregon governor are going to, in a way, wield power, which has been described in the press and by many people as either arrogant or dismissive or whatever, then they, of all people, should expect that Oregonians want to say. And because what that polling does, and based on what you just said, is there's a support to overturn it, but there's even a greater support to just have it on the ballot.
Correct.
Which tells you a significant percentage of Oregonians who may be in favor of the law are rejecting the process because that's not the Oregon way.
Right.
And so you have this dilemma. So how does someone participate to get it on the ballot so we can have a vote?
So there's two places you can go, notaxor.com, notaxor.com. That's our site to volunteer, to get on the list so you can carry a petition. We're recruiting petition captains for various areas. That's, if you want to volunteer and get engaged in the campaign, go to notaxor.com. The campaign website is stopthegastax.com, stopthegastax.com. There you can get information about the process. You can contribute to the PAC. Unfortunately, this costs money. Even if we did it just with volunteers, there's a boatload of costs just for printing and postage. And we do have to pay for help, even if we're not paying for petition signature gatherers, though we intend to raise money for that as well. So the goal of the campaign is to raise about $500,000 to fund the volunteer effort, fund mail so we can mail petitions to people, to known petition signature people that we know sign petitions, and then paying for paid signature gatherers to ensure that Oregonians will have the opportunity to vote on this. So notaxor.com is one place. If you really want to get engaged in this campaign, go there, sign on. Stopthegastax.com is the official website for the campaign.
Bruce, how would you say has been the response so far? So as you're talking about, you talked about polling. We know from the session, we talked about the stacks of paper for and against. It was like 95%, 96%. In those last couple days of the session, when when the governor tried that small Band-Aid bill, and the opposition was incredible.
Right.
That went through. Actually, I was sitting on that committee too because it went through my rules committee, and I think that there were 3 people that were actually for this, and 197 people against it just that day, and only had a few hours to respond.
Right.
And so every single instance has been this overwhelming 90+% opposition over and over and over again, whether it's polling, whether it's response, whether it's in person. That's what we saw over and over again. So I have to imagine the response has been pretty incredible, but what are you seeing?
Yeah, so we have thousands of Oregonians that have already logged into the website, volunteered, and they're not just Republicans. It's not just people from rural Oregon that are upset about this. You'd think of, the red part of our state. It is every corner of our state. It is Republicans and libertarians. It's independents. It's conservative Democrats who look at this and say, I want the opportunity to weigh in on that. We have thousands of Oregonians that have already volunteered. We are organized in every county because of that. there's going to be a substantive grassroots effort to get these signatures through the grassroots. If we had more time, we had more than 30 days, I'd have no doubt that we could do this with purely volunteers, because people are fired up. They do not, one, they don't like the way this happened, as you talk about, Mike, but they don't like this tax. They don't like their gas tax going up. They don't like the registration and title fees doubling. They don't like the payroll tax doubling, especially for a service that virtually no Oregonian uses. They're fired up, and I think I believe we're ultimately going to be successful in this, and to a large extent call the governors and the supermajority's hand come January, when really what ought to happen is they ought to say, okay, let's sit down and talk. Let's figure this out.
I think that there's a good reason for that why people are fired up. And just recently, I posted on my social media, it was a graphic, showed the United States, and it was kind of color coded. Do you see that? It was kind of color coded, and the more purplish it was, the lower the cost of gas per gallon, and the more yellow it was higher cost per gallon. It was like, I don't know, $4-ish down to less than $2. And you see this graphic of the United States of America. And on the east and south and towards the middle, it's like this purplish color. And then you get to the West Coast, the good old left coast, and you see Oregon, Washington, and California, and it's practically yellow. And it is so just, when people see that and they just think to themselves, why is it so expensive on the West Coast? And you mentioned it, we all kind of said some things, to why it's so expensive. Low carbon fuel standards, right? In California and Washington, they've got cap and trade. Their fuel is going up. Oregon's is going up because of some of these carbon rulings that we never see the benefit for. I think LCFS in this state is about 10 cents per gallon.
At least.
That's not going towards roads. It's going towards rebates and carbon credits and you name it. And that's expected to go up to 40 cents per gallon over the next 10 years. Nobody's talking about that.
Right.
That has to be repealed. That's on my checklist.
Yeah, that's exactly, those are the kind of things that we put on the table in a conversation that said, okay, if we're gonna charge Oregonians so much more, let's get those dollars onto roads and bridges and highways and make our transportation system work, rather than put that money out in the ether somewhere that nobody ever gets to see it. And I brought this is a headline from the Taxpayer Association. Oregon has the 4th highest gas prices in the nation.
Already? Without this tax.
Without this tax.
Yes.
And you wonder why Oregonians are frustrated? Because unfortunately, our economy is on the edge in our state. Oregonians can't afford this additional tax, and it's estimated to be about $300 per vehicle, new taxes in Oregon. So just think of how that hits families that are today on the edge of making difficult decisions about where they spend their finite resources.
And I saw recently an article. I don't know, maybe it was Oregonian or somebody who talked about that. It was a pretty high percent of the Oregon families don't have $400 in savings.
Yes.
It was
$400. Yeah, a $400 medical bill or something that would put them over the edge or have to dip into something. They don't have it. They just don't have it.
And so with that sort of conditions in the state of Oregon, Governor Kotek and the supermajorities for the Democrats in Salem passed this, because this isn't new news that families don't have a robust savings account in Oregon. So knowing how tight people were, they went ahead and did it, and they refused to become efficient. They refused to cut waste, and they're refusing to acknowledge that Oregonians want to say in how much they're spending under what is, in essence, a promise to reduce carbon output in Oregon. Now, we're a state with, ironically, one of the lowest carbon footprints because of our abundance of trees.
Right.
And we're a big state where we have this natural resource abundance, which sucks carbon out of the air. And compared to our economy, we're a fraction of carbon output compared to other states. But Oregon said, nevertheless, we're going to make it more expensive in Oregon because of our concerns about carbon. Well, people deserve a say in that. People deserve a vote in that. And it's no wonder frustration is pretty damn high.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a reason. I'm just reading a few stats right here. Not only do we have the fourth highest gas prices, we have Oregon, according to Forbes, is the fourth most difficult state to save money. We have the fifth most expensive childcare. According to the bank rate, according to CNBC, Oregon received a D- for cost of living. I mean, the statistics speak for themselves. And there's a reason why Oregon is in the situation that we're in. And that's why Republicans, that's why we sit in that building just across the way, fighting on behalf of Oregonians so that they have a voice, because they don't have a voice right now. And while the majority talks about, fixing climate change, sometimes you got to wonder, is the cure worse than the disease? And I think we got to look at those issues straight in the face.
Well, and we certainly should have a episode on all the climate policy that the state asks, just so that folks know.
Right.
And there are people all over the place in views of this, agenda, whether and Democrats don't agree, Republicans don't agree. I know it can be divisive. Bill Gates
Right.
just recently came out and changed his opinion. So,
I mean, the human race has adapted for tens of
Yes.
thousands of years. We're not without resources. And if you allow Americans, and I'm going to say Americans, if you allow Oregonians the power to innovate, we can innovate our way out of virtually anything. And I think that we need to start having those conversations. We're talking about how, the environmental rules and regulations have impacted transportation and the costs of energy in our state. That's important, and that's part of this conversation. But there's a bigger conversation that needs to be had as well.
well, and we'll probably need to do that. I mean,
probably
you're
need to
certainly
do that.
point, Shelly. But I will say this, is that regardless, Oregonians deserve a say.
Absolutely.
Oregonians deserve a say. Now, I know that I'm a host family for Thanksgiving. I'm at the maturity level where my wife and I host, and thankfully our kids still enjoy they may enjoy free food, I don't know, but they still come over. We have lots of people for Thanksgiving dinner, and my in-laws come over. You get to a certain age where you go to the in-laws or you go to your, and then there becomes that age where it switches, and now you're the host family. So I'm in that stage. I'm going to have a petition there.
There you go.
I'm going to have a petition, and I'm going to say to everyone who is there for Thanksgiving, are you an Oregon voter? Are you a registered Oregon voter? That's number one.
Right.
And then you have to follow the instructions. And I'm going to get a petition filled out.
Absolutely.
Maybe two.
Sure.
Because I have a lot of people for Thanksgiving.
There you go.
And we always have a policy of, if you have a friend or something, and there are no orphans, right? If someone,
Yep, you bring
and
them all.
so
All
we
comers.
always just say all comers. If someone's, I know a good friend, his wife was in Alabama, and he was buying because his kids are out, and I'm just like, dude, you can't be alone. Get over here, And so I'm going to get at least 2 sheets filled out just at Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it is going to be a holiday season you're going to have a lot of your friends that are carrying petition sheets to all the holiday parties and holiday bazaars. And, that's what we're going to be doing this holiday season.
So this is Project Holiday. Is that what I'm
Project
hearing?
Holiday.
Project Holiday. Well, my
100%.
mom, your cousin, my mom,
a fellow McLane.
yes, fellow McLane, is host, and that is what my mom loves to do. And I am sure that we are going to have petitions there as well. But I think that touches on something, and that is, this is a kitchen table issue.
Right.
Cost of living is a kitchen table
Yes.
issue. And I think that whether we're talking about really despising the process of what people are seeing and saying, why can't you work together to make this state better? Why can't you work together to get the roads plowed and the potholes fixed and congestion, my gosh, congestion and capacity, all of these things. But whether it's process or whether it's your pocketbook, these are things that we know are getting worse and worse. And we are recognizing that they need to vote on this. And that vote is their protest.
Right.
And that vote is saying, you need to do something different here. This isn't working. Correct. And go back to session, and I really felt like there was this sense of, we just need to kick the can down the road. Transportation isn't sexy. Let's be honest. It just isn't. It never has been. And nobody really wants to touch it. And we saw our governor. She didn't want to touch it because it's not a winning issue. Because it's really, really hard. You have to do the hard things in order. I will vouch specifically for Bruce. He wants to roll up his sleeves and fix transportation in every part of it. ODOT needs help. The different departments underneath it. Budgets reflect priorities. And that is, whether we're talking about the ODOT budget or whether we're talking about the state budget, those budgets reflect priorities, and it's not a money issue. I can tell you, Oregon, it is not a money issue. Our state budget has doubled in the last decade, and our population has barely changed. So do you feel like your tax money is getting you better services? Do you feel like your tax money is providing you a better, more efficient, better place to raise a family, run a business, work here in Oregon? And I would suggest the answer is no. And when you're talking about an outrage and people really saying, whether it's the process, whether it's saying, it doesn't even matter to me that this is gas tax, no more taxes. Stop taxing me. I can't afford to live in this state. So we see all of these metrics about businesses leaving, people leaving. Our population isn't growing. Some of the worst places for our education system. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And we're becoming a high tax, low service state. And it's embarrassing. There are things that we can do to change the trajectory of the state. And I look forward to, over the next couple months, whether we're talking about Project Holiday and getting these petitions signed, or over the course of the next election cycle, there's opportunity to change the trajectory of the state. And I think that Oregonians are picking up on that. Yeah,
just to piggyback on that, when we successfully get the signatures for this referendum, we'll know in early January. The tax is then put on hold. It does not go into effect. And we're only going to refer the 4 taxes. So there's parts of the bill that are going to go ahead and become part of law. But the 4 taxes we're referring to: the gas tax, the title and registration fee, and the payroll tax. Those are the 4 things that we're going to refer. We're doing that primarily because we can get that all on one piece of paper, makes it simpler for the petition gatherers. When we're successful, those 4 taxes will not go into effect. And they go to the November general election ballot for next year. That's the same election that every Democrat that's in the legislature who voted for this bill, they're going to be on that same ballot. And the governor whose bill it is going to be on that same ballot. So it's an opportunity for Oregonians to weigh in. Not only do they want their gas taxes, title, registration fee, and payroll tax to go up, but do they support the Democrat members who voted in favor of this to tax them without their permission?
Yeah, basically. And with the process that I just think is abhorrent when you jettison the incredible legacy Oregon has and tradition we have. But one thing's for sure: if you sign a petition and get it on the ballot, what you're saying is, I believe what I'm saying when I sign it is, get back to the table and do this right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do it the way we've always done it. Do it bipartisan, bicameral, by branch, and get it done to serve this state.
I don't believe there's a legislator in the building, Democrat or Republican, that don't want to solve this problem. We just have different ideas about how to solve it. And the reality is, when this bill gets paused, and I believe it will in January, there will be a problem that needs to be solved. Mm-hmm. And the governor has the choice at that time. She can follow through with her threats, which we'll see whether she does that or not. My hope is that she picks up the phone and calls Representative Boshart Davis and myself and says, hey, let's get around a table. Let's figure this out for this year. So that'll be 26, an election year, probably not a year where anybody's going to raise taxes, especially in the event that we actually successfully get this on the ballot. But there will be a problem that will need to be solved. And my hope is that that phone actually does ring, and it is an opportunity to get around a table and solve this problem without raising taxes. And then we can talk about, a broader conversation come 2027 when the legislature meets again in regular session, hopefully with a new governor and more Republicans in the building.
Republican governor.
Well, one thing's for sure. You're the point in the House, you're the point in the Senate for the minority party. You're willing today,
Absolutely,
if the phone call comes, to come back to the table and do it the right way, because this process matters.
yeah. On Monday of this week, the Oregon Transportation Commission met, and I read their agenda, and I was like, holy smokes, they are planning to commit a whole bunch of money to various bonding to pay for projects. And I thought, this is not the time to lock up state highway fund revenue. It's not the time to lock up additional federal funds in long-term bonding that you're going to have to pay off over the next 30 years. So I went to the commission and I urged them prudence. I urged them, be conservative, be thoughtful. We likely will need additional flexibility come January. And if you lock up all the state highway fund dollars in commitments to paying back bonds, that takes that portion off the table. Those are the kinds of solutions that we need to get around a table to solve together.
Well, and not to get into the weeds too much, but I think that that's one of the things that, as you dig into this budget, so much of the percentage is paying off debt service and paying off these. And so Bruce is sitting there cautioning, saying, hey, we don't know what this future holds. We didn't pass a comprehensive transportation package. There's this kind of pushback, and they're like, well, this wasn't a package. This was a Band-Aid. I'm like, it was a $4.3 billion Band-Aid, and they immediately say we're going to have to get back to the table and do more. And I just question how much more Oregonians can take. And again, this isn't just paying for roads and bridges and making sure the maintenance and operation is getting done. And our bridges are behind as far as the preservation and how they should be maintained. This is going to other things, and it's not being managed well. And I can't emphasize that enough, that this didn't fix everything, not even close. Right. And there's a lot more to do. And to me, this vote and this referendum tells me that, and I hope the Democrats hear this, to say, get back to the table, get back to the table. Just saying Democrats are going to do this isn't working. And how many times does it not work? You didn't get it done in the session. It came into the last minute. You tried to do a Band-Aid. That didn't work. It failed completely. You come back to a special session. You don't ask Republicans. You spend the entire Labor Day weekend. It's one thing for us. Nobody cares that politicians have to work on a Labor Day weekend. That's fine. I acknowledge that. But all the staff in the building, all the security and the revenue office and the fiscal office and the House staff and the speaker staff everybody came in on that Labor Day weekend, right? Cancel plans, work all weekend. And for what? It didn't even happen. It ended up happening, 15 days later?
Oh, I think more than
30 days later.
But
yeah,
what makes me the maddest is they knew, because they needed a certain senator that was sick, that was hospitalized. They knew that. They still let it happen. And they didn't call the Republicans until it was the last minute to say, can you spare an extra vote? And I'm pretty sure the answer was pound sand, but I don't know if it were those two specific words, but similar to that. And here we are. So it's failure after failure.
Yeah.
It is. And I think once you squander the trust that the public gives you, now trust is, and this is we should have an episode on this, in fact, just about the degradation of common trust that in all sorts of institutions, but by and large, people trusted transportation packages. Mm-hmm. They may not have liked it or parts of it, et cetera, but yeah, one of the last vestiges of trust was squandered. And we need to get back to the process. And well, Bruce, so great leader, Senator Starr. You're on the point with Representative Ed Deal, Jason Williams from Taxpayers Association, trying to give people
The opportunity
a
to
say.
vote.
We'll give you last word.
No, it's all about giving the Oregonians the opportunity to weigh in on this. They want it, and we intend to give it to them. Give them that opportunity. Everybody listening to this needs to go to stopthagastax.com, get signed up, get engaged in the process. We need. Unfortunately, it takes money to do this. You can contribute on that website as well. But ultimately, the goal is to get 10,000 signatures in about 30-ish days, and give Oregonians the opportunity.
How
to
many
vote.
thousand?
100,000.
100,000.
That's our
100,000.
target. We need 78,000 and change, but we're gonna aim for that 100,000 signatures.
So 100,000 registered voters
In the state of
Oregon need to weigh in a
Yep.
short window.
Yep.
That's a lot of people to host for Thanksgiving.
I think we can do it.
And but listeners, you decide.
Right.
And my hope is you'll decide to let Oregonians decide on this. And the message I think that needs to be sent to the governor, to the Democrat majority, supermajorities in the House and the Senate, is enough of the games.
Yep.
Get back to the way we need to do it. Keep our roads safe. Let's have a robust discussion. But more than ever, the people need to say. So thank you for this episode,
Thank you,
and we'll look
Bruce.
forward
You
to
bet.
seeing everyone here at the next episode. Thank you.